Well, good afternoon. This is Mike Layton again. I'm the president of Stochastic Marketing, and for any first-time listeners, Stochastic works with hundreds of HVAC and plumbing contractors who collectively have sold about $4 billion, and we've analyzed more than 40 million of their customer visits to develop our data analytics and the MIR score. Today, I'd like to revisit a conversation I had with Rodney Koop, who many of you should have heard from. He's the president of the New Flat Rate, and we talked at Comfort Tech. We talked at Service World in Las Vegas last week about what he sees in the numbers of the hundreds of contractors who use his software. And we've got kind of two different perspectives here, so I think it's an interesting discussion. But from the numbers that Stochastic sees, the typical HVAC contractor loses money on more than 50% of the homes they get into because on average those customers spend less than $200 with the contractor over a 7-year period. Good afternoon, Rodney.
Hey, Mike. Glad to be here, buddy.
Hey, Rodney, we've been having this discussion for a few years now. It's kind of like the argument, what comes first, a chicken or an egg? Do half the homes an HVAC contractor visits spend less than $500 with him because he's getting into homes looking for replacement? Or is that because he needs an easier way for his employees to sell more profitable repairs or replacements for that matter?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. And I think we all agree that number one is get in a home. We got to get in there to even have an opportunity for an interaction with the customer. But, I think there's a mistake in that we underestimate the enormous opportunity that's available with each customer. And actually, since you and I talked last, I've been analyzing some new material that shows that most contractors really never even break into a profit for about the first 7 visits in their service department. Not that they don't want to, but what happens is by trying to move out of the service call and into a replacement call, we kind of miss that opportunity. And I think it's a huge opportunity. And in the data that we look at, I think it's important to first of all say that when a customer invites you into their home to fix something, they're looking for 3 things. And it's the same 3 things that they expect if they take their car to the Ford dealership. If you take your car or truck to Ford for a repair, number one, you're pretty sure they can fix it. I mean, you're confident they know what they're doing. They'll find the problem and fix it. But number 2 is you fully expect them to be reliable. You trust them. They will stand behind the work. But number 3, you fully expect it to cost a little more than you're comfortable with. And how many of us take our car to the repair shop and we feel that way? Well, it's a little more than I would have liked to have had, but I got it done. I'm happy. I'm on the road. You see, that's success. They got a very profitable call, and you got your car fixed in a trusted, reliable manner that gave you confidence. Well, I'll just tell you, their average ticket is $960. Our average ticket in the heating and air industry tends to run around $250 for the most part, and a little more than like $370, $380 in plumbing. So that's where I say that I think we underestimate the opportunity when we're face-to-face with a customer.
Well, Rodney, Stochastic tends to approach kind of everything from a sales and marketing perspective in our marketing efficiency and effectiveness rating report that we call the MIR score. But as you've explained the flat rate pricing system to me in the past, there is some retailer psychology at play, which you kind of alluded to with the car dealers, about how your system presents options to consumers. They automatically reject the lowest and the highest options and generally settle on what's right for them, generating a kind of a generally higher sale. is that kind of what you see as the opportunity there?
Well, yeah, there's definitely an average that comes into play. It's interesting if you go to any retailer, for example, Walmart, and let's say you're looking at a coffee maker. Now, the cheapest coffee maker they have is probably $8 or $9, and
Right.
You and I think, well, my gosh, nobody would ever buy that. The most expensive one is going to run up in the hundreds. But I want you to think about the cashier. Let's say you're the cashier for the day at Walmart, and somebody comes through the line, and they actually did buy that $9 coffee maker. What do? You scan it, beep, you take their credit card or their money, you put it in the sack and hand it to them, and you don't think anything about it because that's what they wanted. You don't think, hey, man, are you crazy? You're going to buy that piece of junk? No, it's their choice. But if a guy walks through with a $300 coffee maker, you do the same thing. You scan it, beep, you put it back in his cart, you take his money, and you wish him a good day. You see, so every now and then, really about 20% of the time, people buy the highest priced things. 10 to 20% of the time, they're going to buy the lowest. But just like you said, most of the time, they're going to go right in the middle. And in the retail business, that's called product placement. On the shelf, at eye level or just below, is actually the most profitable and sometimes the most reliable products, because that is a real win-win for everybody. So that is a retail methodology. It's simple retail thinking. And yes, we can do that with our service calls. Absolutely.
Well, that kind of brings up an interesting topic. Retailers tend to have very tight margins, right? But contractors pay themselves out of profit margins. So everybody wants to find and sell high margin replacement systems, but they often have to run at least 7 service calls to find a replacement if they're lucky. It's usually 10 calls. Sometimes I've seen 14 service calls before they find a replacement. How's the new flat rate type of solution improve margins on the majority of the calls the contractor runs? It's 10, 14 calls they run for every replacement they find. How does it improve the profit margins on most of the calls?
Well, that's a question that I love to answer. And of course, as I said recently, by product placement. If you had a system that placed your best, most profitable products at the most perceptive, acceptable place for your customers, well, you'd want to use it. But I want to backtrack to the auto industry and just mention one thing. When I was out there doing service calls, if I came upon an air conditioner, let's say that it was 15 years old or something. Now, here in Georgia, that means it's probably rusted out by now. But I want you to think about my thought process. I'm doing a service call, and I own the company, right? Which means I got to make payroll and all that, and I'm having to do service calls probably because, money's tight and all of that. So I'm doing a service call. Here's a heat pump that's, let's say, 15 years old. Do you know what my biggest fear is?
You'll lose the order?
Yes. I'm afraid that if they don't buy something from me, and right now today, they're going to buy that. One of my competitors is going to sneak in there, either by getting lucky, like I'm not around, and so he gets the service call and sells it, or maybe his salesperson is better than me, so if they get a shot at it, if the customer wants to go out and think about it, and maybe a better salesman will come in, or just maybe they'll fix it today, but next time their cousin or somebody will sell them a new unit. So my greatest fear, oh my gosh, this thing's 15 years old, somebody's going to sell them a replacement, and it might not be me. Now, watch the thinking. See, and here's what I've done, by the way. I've studied Ford Motor Company since I was 16 years old. I actually bought stock in Ford, and I studied them because they seem to think differently than my dad, who was an electrical contractor. They charged twice as much as we did for labor, and bottom line is just to say I've spent my lifetime studying the Ford Motor Company. But now think about this analogy. When you go in to get your car fixed, let's say it's 15 years old. I recently took a service van, not a service van, but a passenger van into Ford because I was getting ready to take it on a road trip. And I think it's a 2006 model, which makes it 10 years old. Guess what? They rebuilt the entire front end on it, repacked my wheel bearings, did something else. Anyway, it was, guess what? Remember I said the average ticket's $960? It was $957 out the door. But the service writer never once suggested that I go look at a new vehicle. Isn't it? And you and I both know that that service manager is paid off the profit of the service department. So he's not sending any business to the sales department. But he had no fear.
Yeah.
Just for a second, remember that my greatest fear when I would be at the air conditioning customer's house, I had the fear, that somebody would get their business, sell them a unit, and take them away from me. But we don't see that at the Ford dealer. They don't seem to have any fear in the service department. Oh my gosh, if we don't get Rodney into a new vehicle, he could be driving a Chevrolet by this time next month. You see the difference in the psychology there?
Yeah, well, what's the typical, profit margins that the typical HVAC contractor should be looking for?
All right.
20% margins or something. Yeah, so let's say you read in some of the books 20% margins for contractors, and what are the profit ranges that you look at or you see in most of the guys that you work with?
I see that in the replacement side, they can run 30 to 40% profit if you were to take the service division out of it. In other words, if all they had to do is show up, do the job, they could run pretty high, but usually they seem to stay more closer to 20%. Now, and I'm talking on their net profit. But you actually have better numbers there than I do. Now, on the service side, most contractors would say, well, service is more profitable. It could be 70 or 80%. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's usually more like about 8 to 12%. Now, how is that possible? I think it's because we go in afraid. We go in simply trying to keep the customer, maybe even getting them into a maintenance program. But what is our eye on? All our eye is on is the replacement. Now, an average replacement sale, and I think you probably have some numbers, more numbers than I do. But let's say, I think your numbers would say that an average replacement sale is going to profit about $2,400. Is that about right?
About right, yeah. But unless you're in a high, if you're on the West Coast, you're in San Francisco, you're in Los Angeles, the systems are generally more expensive. But for most of the country, roughly around $7,500 is the average replacement sale. Some guys are afraid you can see they don't sell many $10,000 and up systems, so the average winds up being about $7,500. So at a third, that's about $2,500.
Yeah.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, I think your clientele is on a little bit of the higher end of the average market, because I've certainly heard numbers a lot lower than that. But let's just say that $2,500. Now, let's say that it takes 7 to 10 service calls of one way or another to get to a replacement. This is what product placing does. This is what a menu selling system does. If we go in there with an automatic set of options for every repair, Now, remember, the customer, they don't have to take it. They could say, well, how about a replacement system? But if I show them 5 options every time, or ever how many, if I show them options, the top option is typically going to be a lot higher than the average service repair. When they look at that higher number, they will immediately correlate to the age of their unit, and there's a good chance, if they can afford it, they'll ask on the replacement what it costs to buy a new system. But before we get there, what's happened is product placement makes that middle to high middle look attractive, and the average ticket goes up $200 or more on almost every call. Well, when I say average, you can look at your numbers by the week or by the month, and if you put in a menu system with virtually no upselling by the technicians, the average ticket goes to $200 above what it was before. And virtually, typically in air conditioning, at $200 over average, that's almost 100% new profit. So let's say they're already making 10, 15, 20% profit on their service business. Let's just give them that, then take those 10 calls. That's another $200. That's another $2,000 over those 10 calls before they even replace. So by the time your company, using a menu system, offers somebody a replacement, you already have $2,000 cash more than your competitor while you stand there talking to that customer. Imagine the advantage that gives you on your replacement. So if you make the money you should in your service department, you have a huge advantage in replacement. But if the customer loves the interaction, if they love using a menu, then you're going to get that replacement. You are the man when they need a replacement. Does that make sense, or am I going in circles?
No. You're right, because it's the whole psychology. You're not trying to figure out, boy, if I don't get the replacement, I'm not going to eat this week, right? You're already you relax, and you kind of let the deal go where it kind of needs to go. It's a psychological way of selling. Now, let's talk about, hit on more of the psychology of the people that are working for the contractor, that are in a home. When we were having dinner with your wife, you kind of mentioned something that was a little bit intriguing, and I wanted to kind of share that conversation kind of with the listeners. If I heard you correctly a month or so ago, and I think that's right, a significant percentage of HVAC techs, or plumbers for that matter, don't really want to be salesmen. So, forcing them to try and become salespeople either forces them to be poor salespeople, because they kind of just go through the motions, or they become unhappy techs. And if they're unhappy, they become lousy salespeople. And lousy salespeople are a problem. So, combining the two doesn't sound like a good idea. So what's the easiest way to turn people into better salespeople, even people that really don't want to sell, right?
Right. Well, exactly. And first of all, the easiest way is to have the right product or the right product perception. Another quick car analogy, and I know you're probably getting tired of this, but in 1980, I sold cars for a year because I just didn't want to be an electrician. And
well,
that's about the time.
Explains a lot. This explains a lot.
But that's about the time Toyota came out with their four-wheel drive, the whatever that little Toyota pickup is.
The Hilux truck.
Hilux
truck.
Yeah, and they called it the son of a Land Cruiser. Now, Toyota's Land Cruiser was like a Land Rover. I mean, it just lasted forever. You could take them across the desert. Now get this, when they came out with their four-wheel drive pickup, I was in Grand Forks, North Dakota, working as a car salesman, and if somebody wanted one, they walked in, they said, I want a pickup, how do I buy one? You said you put $2,000 down, and when one comes in, you come and pay the rest. And we marked them up $2,000 over Toyota's sticker price, just because everybody wanted them. So when you say, how do you get a service technician to sell? Well, you just make it so darn easy that it sells itself. So the way we do that is, number one, let them be who they are. They love to diagnose. They love to repair. They love to understand the mechanics. Now, how can we take the customer interaction? All we do is once they diagnose, they simply go to their iPad or their book and they select the menu for that diagnostic, and then they show it to the customer. The psychology is just like when you walk into McDonald's. There's the cashier, but that cashier at McDonald's is not a salesperson. All they do is take the order. You look up at the menu, you see the big, you see the little, and you walk right up and he says, "Hi, welcome to McDonald's," and you say, "Hey, I'll have a number 3 combo." Well, that's how a menu works. So for 8 years, Mike, what we've done in our testing, and this is now being used 30,000 times every week. So in our testing, just like you, we take the data and we compare it. The KPI we compare it to is McDonald's. At McDonald's, a decision is made under 15 seconds from the time you walk in the door. So we say from the time they see the menu, will they choose an option in 15 seconds or less? At McDonald's, there's typically no discussion about why is that hamburger cost so much. So at the menu, we say, is anybody arguing about the cost of any one of these? And as long as the answer is no, we know that it's working. And then the third thing is buyer's remorse. Almost nobody ever calls the manager of McDonald's and says, "You ripped me off, you sold me an $8 hamburger." So we say, okay, 30,000 times a week, are people coming back and calling you and saying, "You ripped me off"? And again, it's not happening. We're not getting Google slapping on reviews. So we find that if you'll just simply take and put a menu in the hand of the technician, you just took all of the stress and everything away from him. He no longer has to even begin to feel like he's trying to sell anything at all. He's simply just showing the product to the customer. Simple as that.
Well, 30,000 tech calls a week. I mean, how many contractors? That's a lot, right? That's a lot of techs. How many contractors, how many new guys do you think you talk to or work with in a typical year when you're not chasing all those 9 grandkids around?
Yeah, exactly. We typically talk to about, just about 4 contractors a day, something like that. So now we don't work with that many, but when I say we talk to a contractor, over 750 contractors a year give us their numbers. How many service trucks, how many service calls a week, and what's the average repair? We get those numbers so often that we're able to tally them, and that's why I can easily say the average repair HVAC is under $250. But of the ones that choose to do business with us, there's typically over 100 new contractors every year that come on board with us, and that's growing. What we do is we take their numbers, and then we do 2 things. Number one, we obviously want to look for the improvement. Typically, the improvement is going to be 200 or more, increase in profit on every call, almost immediately. But then we want to track that information and see where it's coming from, what part of their market is producing it, what type of service calls. So kind of like the way that you're able to take the analytics and take them down and look at them many, many different ways on replacement sales and marketing. That's what we do strictly on the service side. We're also looking at replacement sales, and here's what we find. We find that the longer that we use a menu system any place, the closing rate goes up for the replacements. And we attribute that to the buyer trust. The buyer never feels like anybody's trying to sell them anything. So when it's time to replace, they feel totally comfortable in letting our company or our client provide the replacement. Typically, they will never, ever, typically, they will not look for quotes from anybody else.
So because that is, I have a ton of guys that's their main fear. They're going to get an alternate bid or a second proposal. what's the most common business challenge you see in the HVAC or plumbing contractors?
Well,
what do you think? Number 1, 2, 3.
Well, what pushed me to develop the new flat rate was simply money. I kept running out of cash. At the end of the year, I was lucky if I could buy Christmas presents. And so money. Now, not for everybody. There's plenty of contractors out there that have cash. They're larger, they have the volume, they have the marketing. And a lot of times, if they dominate their market, they should have cash. But everybody else in the market typically is struggling. So the people that we talk to, we find out that probably over 80% of the HVAC contractors, they need money. And the problem with money is when you don't have it, you don't think right. You make the wrong financial decisions, the wrong marketing decisions, the wrong hiring decisions. So number 1 is money. But when people come on board with us and the money starts coming in, and I mean you can almost watch it pile up because it's week after week of $2,000 to $5,000 per truck additional money. Now, so problem number 1 is solved, the money. But then the second problem moves to number 1. All of a sudden we're making money on our service calls and it's going steady, but now the phone doesn't ring enough. See, now that we know how to make money, now that our customer exchanges are great, we want more of them, or at least we want them to be steady. So marketing is number 2. No question about it. Number 1, money. Number 2, marketing. We have to get that engine going of money and marketing. Once you get that engine turning, it's like a rotary engine, then that becomes the foundation for your company. And then number 3, whatever the heck that is.
Checks, probably. Lack of checks. Lack of checks, probably.
And it's because when you can run your business profitably with money and consistently with the right marketing, now you're ready to grow. And so you have to be able to find quality people. And if you're looking for technicians that can sell, you just put the brakes on your engine because, number 1, they're hard to find. Number 2, if you go through the training process, you're going to lose some and be disappointed. So that is, when you get that engine running, if you can't find quality people, it's like running a car on old beat-up wheels and tires. It's not good. And I might interject, since I know you like numbers, a life insurance company such as, let's just say, New York Life, did you know that they will take 1,000 applications for a life insurance salesman, and after it all sifts down, out of that 1,000, they're only hoping to get 3 that can make it as a life insurance salesman. And those 1,000 were looking for a sales job. So when I realized that we're trying to take service technicians and hire them to sell in the home on service calls, I thought, my gosh, even an insurance company can't do that. And so that's when we decided we had to change it. So when you can just put an ad in the paper that says, so much an hour, looking for top quality air conditioning technicians, no selling required. When you can put no selling required on the ad, your phone starts to ring off the hook. And you soon find out there's plenty of labor out there as long as you're not trying to make them into service salesmen.
Well, how long do your customers need to give it before they typically see an improvement in sales from implementing a program like yours?
Typically, as soon as they start it, like say somebody decides to come on board with us, and they see, oh my gosh, this really makes sense to me. Well, it takes a week or so to get their digital pricing and all of that set up. Sometimes just a few days. But then, depending on how they want to train their team, if they have several technicians, they might want us to help train them. But either way, they should see $2,000 to $5,000 per truck increase, usually no later than the second week. I mean, it's virtually immediate. It's like rearranging the shelves at the store. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, look at that! People are buying more.
They're buying what we want them to buy instead of
right.
going into Costco and just picking it off a pallet. Well, what advice would you give somebody that's kind of struggling and just can't break out of that low profit rut?
There's two things that are critical. Number one, you have to find a way to make money, and you have to make it on each interaction. If you're in front of the customer, and my gosh, if they'll spend $960 at Ford Motor Company, why wouldn't they spend that when you come to them, you bring the parts, you bring the truck, you come at their convenience? Are you kidding me? The money is there. Step one, you have to find a way to get money. And step two, you got to quit spending money until you make it. If you can get those two together, you can actually turn the corner on your business usually within 30 days. It's a whole new company, and you can enjoy coming to work again.
Well, one of the things we hear contractors tell us all the time is that they just need more leads from their marketing, And sure, we all need more leads or cheaper leads. But often when we dig into the numbers, we show them they're not doing enough with the leads they have.
Right.
Why do you think most contractors don't commit themselves to what it takes to have a more profitable company, even when their numbers scream, fix this now?
Well, it's because it's what my son calls survivor mode. And boy, have I ever been there. When you're just trying to survive, you're just trying to make payday. Even if you have a good marketing program, but you went out and you took the calls and you didn't make the money you needed, now you can't afford to keep up the marketing. And why? Because in survivor mode, the payroll screams the loudest. Number two, your utilities scream the loudest. And then number three, your suppliers. You've got to buy supplies and tools. You've got to pay the utilities and the phone, and you've got to make payroll. Until you're comfortable and confident that is flowing smoothly, your marketing is always going to be sporadic because it's hard to trust the guy that is giving you the expert wisdom on marketing if he's giving you leads and you don't have a system or a process to maximize. And I mean, you could give me 10 great leads this week, Mike, but if I don't have a system to maximize, or how about this? If I am so stressed, so hurting, so desperate, so frustrated, I might blow every one of those leads. So your leads get better as I get better, don't they?
I mean, when I see the numbers, and I mean, we've looked at like 40 million visits to homes. Half of the customers somebody puts on the books, they get less than $200 from. Well, if I add $200 to that average, I'm a lot more patient with my employees and with my marketing investments, and I'm not stopping and starting because cash flow's killing me, particularly in the shoulder months, right?
That's right.
Everybody can, you hope, can make money in May, June, July, particularly in the South, right? When you got breakdowns and you're running them down, and you think I'm going to get this full system replacement because it's no cool call today. But so often and what we really focus on is we try and put people in front of the most likely replacement prospects, but still half of those calls are going to be ones where they don't, they really lose money in the current model on half of their customers. So that's most of the calls. So if I can raise that by $100 or $200, most of that probably goes to the bottom line.
It absolutely does. No question about it. Also, if you know that your service repair tickets are extremely profitable, then you can take a replacement lead, and maybe they responded to the marketing and invited you in their home for a replacement lead, but maybe that's one of those calls that you're not going to get on a replacement, But what if you could just simply recommend a system renovation or a repair or something, knowing that it's so easy to provide it because we've created the process that does it. Now you don't mind taking them on as a service or repair customer or even a maintenance customer. You actually can get them to do business with your company even though they didn't buy a replacement. So what happens is we all would love to have service repairmen and salesmen who can sell and upsell all the time. So what we did at the new flat rate is we just simply created a system that does it for them. It's a complete done for them system that takes even the salesmen and the servicemen, and it just takes all the stress off of them. But now your salesman can not only sell replacements, but why not let them sell repairs or a maintenance visit or something while they're in the house? You see, if you give them a system that does all that for them, imagine now you get 100 leads from stochastic marketing. How valuable are those leads now that you have a system that processes them without having to depend on somebody coming to work today feeling the very best they possibly could, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, Rodney, I appreciate you taking the time to kind of recap some of our conversations. Sometimes the best things when you go to these trade shows are actually the conversations you have afterwards or before the show opens, which is kind of what I find. I know you had a big crowd at the Tropicana last week, filled a room full of people. But how do people reach out to you? How do they just Google you on the new flat rate? Is that the easiest way to reach out to you and your team?
Yeah, if they search for the new flat rate, we'll come up. But we've got dozens of videos on YouTube, all kind of things. Yeah, but they can just reach out to us that way, easy. They can our phone number. I could give it to you here, but you know
sure.
How that
Yeah,
is.
go ahead. Yeah.
It's 706-226-2055. But they can Google us. And basically what they do is give us a call, and we'll usually just answer your questions if that's all you want, or we can send you videos, or, of course, we can just go online and show you how it works. But the main thing is to make a difference, because we've got a new year coming. Anybody that wanted to come online with our system could be totally up and running, everybody trained, and 2017 could be the year that turns their life around.
And when you slow down in the fall, most particularly in the South, you typically slow down for the next 2-3 months. It's the easiest time to implement change.
That's right.
There's no reason really to wait.
And also when you're slow, if you go from X number of calls a week to maybe 20% of those calls, now is when you need those calls to count. If you could just double and triple your average ticket in the slow times, what a difference that would make. And that's what we do.
Well, let's wrap this up. I think hopefully the listeners will answer some of their questions, and let's just catch up again real soon.